This morning I was on my way out to a field to photograph purple martins whenever I came across a butterfly garden that is being maintained by a local gardening club. And as I was looking at it, a ruby-throated hummingbird caught my eye, and I completely abandoned all my plans to photograph the purple martins. I spent several hours in the sun with the ruby-throated hummingbird. Now, I want to say hummingbirds, but it was really just one female ruby-throated hummingbird that would spend time at the garden there. She was really interested in the scarlet bee balm. So she would go from flower to flower, spending about 30 to 60 seconds in the area, and that would give me opportunities to photograph, and then she would fly off lickety-split and wouldn't return for sometimes 10 minutes at a time. There was one other, and I'm not sure if it was a mate or if it was kind of a territorial battle, because what would happen sometimes is one of the hummingbirds would fly in and then the other one would come in quickly, and then they would both disappear. So it might have been a territory thing where they were kind of duking it out over who had the priority of that bee balm. My goal was to freeze those extremely fast wings of the ruby-throated hummingbird as best as I could, and I knew that I was going to have to use a very, very fast shutter speed. Now, I use something that's completely ridiculous, 1/8,000th of a second. My lens of choice today was the Canon 200 to 800. Now, zoomed in at 800, I know that it's going to be an f9 aperture. I wasn't really worried about that as far as the focusing, because that bird is going to be moving so fast, and I thought that it would give me just a little bit more depth to work with if my focus was just a little bit off. So being at roughly f9, I knew that my ISO was going to have to be high. So I pretty much averaged somewhere around 6400 for my ISO. Sometimes I bumped it up just a little bit higher if the sun was hiding behind the clouds. I wasn't really concerned about high ISOs. The R5 does a fantastic job handling those high values, and Topaz Photo AI is going to be able to clean that right up. But the other thing that made me not concerned at all is that I knew that I was shooting in a bright environment. So I wasn't worried about shadows and then boosting them up and then having noise. So as long as my exposure was right, the high ISOs wasn't going to be a problem at all. And that proved to be the case as I reviewed my images. The first adjustment that I had to make using the 200 to 800 in this instance is I initially was way too close to the subject. I had to pull myself back. You know, hummingbirds, they notoriously are not too worried about people, so that wasn't an issue at all. He was coming in close, but I realized very quickly that, wait a minute, I was too close for that minimum focal distance to be able to find my focus. So I scooted back, and that helped to correct that problem. Now, I have my camera set up so that I have dual back button focus. One of my buttons operates as an eye focus, and then the other one as single point. I found very quickly that in this setting that I was in, there's a lot going on. I very rarely had an opportunity where the hummingbird didn't have some kind of flower that wasn't that far away behind him. So the eye focus had a tough time sometimes determining what my subject actually was. But that's where the single point focus comes in handy. So I was able to tap on the single point focus, it would find the subject, and then I could go back to the eye focus. Now, actually, a lot of times, because it was so busy in that butterfly garden, I actually ended up using single point focus quite a bit, and that seemed to work pretty well. I will say, though, that this is probably the first time that I wasn't extremely happy with the experience of using the 200 to 800. There were many times that it was struggling to find focus. Again, this is kind of a tough scenario for it. This is a natural environment. There are a lot of people who photograph hummingbirds in kind of like natural studio setups, and I'm not finding fault with those people at all, but I would much rather do it in a natural setting just like this, which is going to make capturing images much more difficult. Some people, what they do is they set up actually flash. They will hang a feeder and have a nice clean background behind it and set their focus, and they're able to just fire away anytime the hummingbird comes into that section that they have determined for the food and for their focus. This scenario, the hummingbird, what he would do is he would come in And it was really neat to watch. I had no idea which flower he was going to pick, so I had to quickly find him, and it was a little bit of a challenge. Sometimes I would zoom back a little bit and then zoom in to be able to find the subject in the frame because, you know, shooting from 500 to 800 millimeters, he is kind of small. There's a lot going on. It's a little bit difficult to find him. But once I found my focus, it was a lot of fun to watch her habits in this natural environment. She would make a circle around each flower and then fly to another one. And each time that she flew to another one was another opportunity or challenge for me to be able to find the subject in the frame and focus. And a lot of times I was trying to focus with the bird behind a flower or a weed or something in the way. Some other setting considerations: you want to make sure that you're shooting at high speed continuous and that you're in servo mode so that the focus will continue to follow the subject once it's latched on. Hopefully you can hear me with the air conditioner running right now. I'm in my truck. I've got the air conditioner on full blast right now. It's 72 degrees outside. Now in the sun, I know it's a lot warmer than that, but the R5 heated up. I was getting the overheating warning for quite a while, and I thought that I was shooting 120 frames per second, trying to capture some footage of the hummingbird in slow motion. And whenever I reviewed it back, I realized that the camera actually, it was set to 120 frames per second, but it kept recording at a lower frame rate. I'm not exactly sure what it was. I'll have to check whenever I get back to my computer. But it's really frustrating. This is why I'm really, really looking forward to the R5 Mark II and hopefully having some corrections to be able to shoot continually even in the sun. You know, I think that's not too much to ask for a camera that's $4,000. So after I became frustrated with the heat issues of the R5, I threw the 200 to 800 on the R7. It was a lot of fun to use that crop sensor camera with this 200 to 800, and I actually didn't have any difference in finding the subject within the frame. Those extra millimeters that the crop sensor provided didn't make that any more difficult. The issue that I ran into, though, was that the camera's buffer writing the images to the card kept filling up. Now, I was shooting in CRAW to prevent some of this. I think that my card might have been a little bit too slow for the rapid firing that I had going on with these hummingbirds. I, maybe was holding down on that shutter just a little bit too much, shooting in electronic shutter mode, and the buffer kept filling up. And as the bird would move into some just fantastic prime shooting areas, it was kind of heartbreaking because I was looking at this hummingbird with a completely clean background, just thinking, man, this shot is awesome. And I look down in the viewfinder and you see that horrible word, busy. And that was a little bit frustrating. I've been using this lens for quite a while, and I can tell you that it's not a perfect lens. There are times it's going to struggle to find autofocus depending on the scenario, but that can probably be said for any lens that you might be using. But it is a lot of fun to use. I always enjoy my time whenever I'm out in nature using this lens where you're able to capture extreme close-ups of close subjects. I have several videos where I detail my experiences with it, and you can check one of them out over here. I'll see you there.